God for this far that God has seen us through this week, and indeed He has been on our side. So, before we do anything else, I would wish that we introduce ourselves. Mwalimu, will start with you.
Let me take this opportunity to greet you in the name of Jesus Christ, and I hope that you are doing well. I'm Wycliffe Omari, your fellow brethren from Bakasi, Radi. Hope you actually continue being with us throughout the end of the lesson of this week. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mwalimu. I'm also one of you, that is Michael Abunga, and I hope that we are going to sail through the whole lesson as a unit. Thank you very much. Mwalimu, can you lead us in a word of prayer?
Okay, thank you. Let us bow for the word of prayer. Our Heavenly Master above in heaven, we thank you for the gift of life that you have given us, Lord. We don't deserve to be before you, but because of thy grace and mercy, we have seen it's good for us to be alive today, oh Lord. As we are going to start lesson discussion of this week, we pray that you may guide us through thy Holy Spirit, and also thy light of countenance fall upon us, and sail with us through until we come to the end of the lesson discussion. And may it be of a great benefit to us. And we pray this, believing and trusting through the mighty name of Jesus Christ. Amen. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So, before we do the introduction of this week's lesson, I would wish that we link our lesson of this week with the lesson of the previous week. So, Mwalimu, without taking a lot of time, kindly can you remind us what was the topic of the lesson of last week?
Okay, actually we see last week's lesson, it was lesson 10, whereby we saw the Bible as history, and we learned a lot of main things from the previous lessons about. We saw how King David, Solomon, and other people, like even the history about Jesus Christ, whereby we saw the kings who had ruled and the way they were ruling, and we saw actually everything that was actually done in those ancient days. They were actually recorded for our own good, for us to study something from there. So in everything that actually which was recorded in the Bible, it's of great impact to us, and actually it should help us to increase our faith to the founder of the universe, and also we fully depend on him, and knowing that everything is all well, and he is actually the ruler of what? Of the universe.
Thank you very much, Mwalimu. As all of us are aware, history basically is the study of the past events, and already the writings in the Bible are things which have already been written previously, and they either way affected our forefathers, and they are still affecting us. And when we look at the term Bible, simply it means being informed before life ends. So we need to get this information that is written in the Bible before life comes to an end. Then mainly to just unravel what we did last week is that we realized that the Bible possesses recordings of what has already happened, and some of the things have been prophesied, and they are yet to take place. Without taking a lot of time in the previous lesson, I wish that we narrow down into our today's lesson, and Mwalimu, I request you to guide us on the overview of the whole lesson. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Without taking much time, the lesson of this week is about the Bible and prophecy. And as we are going through as we are going to go through the entire lesson. The overview of it, actually, we see it helps us to know how the archaeology and the historical documents support what we find in the Bible. Whereby this week we'll discover studies and findings that do support the Bible narrative about King David, whereby actually we will see the way how King David and his son Solomon, Israel monarch, about sorry, Mwalimu, the overview of this week's lesson. We'll see actually the way how important things that will make us to be saved, and also to know how we should accurately interpret what? The Bible. And also we need also to know that 30% of the Bible, it is prophecy. So we will know, actually we don't need even to omit or to see these prophetic books as something that should not be learned or that it is difficult to know. So what is the historist method and why it is preferable to other prophetic methods of interpretation, whereby we will see it on the Sunday, how good the history is and how good it is actually, and the best method of it to help us to know how we should interpret the scripture. Also on the Monday, we'll see how do we know when the day or for a day for a year principle is appropriate. And also on the Tuesday, we'll see why is knowing about the little horn power important. How important is that by knowing the little horn. And also we will see what prophecy supports the investigative judgment, and what does it mean for our world today. That is the Tuesday. Then Thursday, we will see actually what is the value of typology in interpreting prophecies. Actually, I think reaching up to that point, I would like to invite you to take us through the introduction part.
Thank you very much. This week's lesson is all about the Bible and prophecy. And before maybe we go into deeper and the nitty-gritties of the topic, we need to vividly understand the term prophecy. What is prophecy? Mwalimu, if somebody corners you somewhere and asks you, what is prophecy? In your own words, what can you say prophecy is?
Okay, actually prophecy, as we understand, these are the events are being foretold, are being prophesied. And biblically, we see these prophecies that are being prophesied is something that is being predicted that is going to happen in future. And as Adventists, we get to see that these prophecies are there to help us to know where we have come from and where we are and where we are going to.
Thank you. Simply, as Mwalimu, you said that prophecy is prediction made under the divine inspiration. So it is a prediction. And when we talk about prediction, it is something that is yet to happen, that is going to happen. So it means that is something that has been foretold, just the way you have just told us. Thank you very much. Now, we need to understand very important 3 or 4 questions in prophecy. And prophecy, for us to be in a position to use it or utilize it in our lives, 1, we need to understand what prophecy is. Then 2, we need to interpret prophecy in the right way. Then by so doing, at the end of the day, we are going to use it, or we are going to consume it in the right way. So before we narrow down to the verse, number 1 question is, what is prophecy? We have answered that. And then 2, Do you think we need prophecy? Is it important that we have prophecy? You personally, do you need prophecy?
Very much important to me personally. I need it because it's what will help me know the things that actually are happening today, to prepare me so that I be ready for the second coming of Christ Jesus.
Asante sana mwalimu. Let's move into our today's key text, and it comes from the book of Daniel, chapter 8, verses 14. The Bible records 8:14. The Bible records, he said to me. Who is this saying? He said to me. Acha tusikie. It will take 2,300 evenings and mornings. Then the sanctuary will be reconsecrated. Mwalimu,
Yes.
what do you understand by that verse?
Actually, we see the 2,300 mornings and evenings that have been mentioned there.
Yes.
We see actually these are actually days, but in prophecy we see days. One day is actually like 1 year before God, and that one actually we know it very well. And we see now that verse actually when it says that the end of those days, then the sanctuary shall be cleansed. We see that is immediate the end of those 2,300, and we will see actually when we will continue going through the entire lesson, we will see where there is actually the end of these 2,300 years came to the end, and whereby the sanctuary was being cleansed and what will follow after. Yeah.
Thank you. Now that we've been already notified that unto 2,300 days, then shall the sanctuary be cleansed. If I wish to know, have these days already ended, or they are still in progress, or we are starting them, or we are yet to start them?
Thank you, Mwalimu. It's actually a very good question, whereby our viewers, they need to know whether these days have ended or are not yet, or they will start maybe the other years to come. But when we read actually the spirit of prophecies, we get to know that these days actually ended in the year 1844. So there we are sure that the heavenly sanctuary had already cleansed, and now we are living at the grace period, whereby now it's actually towards the end. It's only what has remained is Christ to come for the second time.
Thank you very much, Mwalimu. Now, so our viewers, I know back at home you are going to ask us, if these days ended in the year 1844, then when did they begin? Thank you. The simplest answer is the days began in the year 457 BC, and BC stands for before Christ. That one gives us a negative, and all of us are students of mathematics. If you use your algebra, and rather not algebra, but if you use your integers very well, if you subtract, rather you add from the year negative 457, you add it to 2,300 days, you will get 1843. But then there is that 0, which is also considered as an integer. So you also need to add 1. Then it will give you 1844. So the days that have been spoken, or the years which have been spoken at the 2,300 days or years, ended in the year 1844. And I believe, Mwalimu, you are not there, or you are there?
I was not there.
Okay, thank you. So this week we will study the pillars and the historical prophetic interpretation. We are also yet to see the history, the fulfillment of prophecy, and we will study the workings of providency in the great reformatory movements, and to understand the progress of events in the marshalling of the nations for the final conflict of the great controversy. Thank you very much, Mwalimu. Unless you have something to add on introduction.
No, actually, this vital text whereby when we read this verse, that is the Daniel chapter 8 verses 14, it's actually a vital text which is vital to knowing that judgment in the heavenly sanctuary has already begun. So actually, as the sanctuary service was designed to teach us, the day of atonement is fast approaching, and now in the time to prepare our hearts for our soon coming Lord Jesus Christ.
Asante sana. There is maybe one question. You might be confusing our viewers. They might question. Mwalimu once mentioned that there is the heavenly sanctuary. Then the question is, do we have the earthly sanctuary?
Yes, of course there is, because we see we are seeing started from heaven, and maybe also actually you have reminded me, maybe also they can ask why the heavenly sanctuary should be cleansed. Remember, Satan defiled the heavenly sanctuary because that is the origin where the sin started from. So also we see the earthly sanctuary, actually it is we see when the Israelites were actually they had priests, and we all know that. And these earthly priests, yearly they went to the sanctuary to cleanse and also to do what? To pray for forgiveness for those children of Israel. So the earthly sanctuary also is there, and also there is the heavenly sanctuary. And now this earthly sanctuary, for it to be cleansed, that is when the Christ is going to come for the second time to take his fellow people, those who have actually stayed connected to him.
Something on him. Maybe just to add on something, or to add on what you said, that in the ancient days of Moses and the likes, we need to understand that people needed to be forgiven their sins.
Yes.
Therefore, there was a requirement that one who had sinned was supposed to come to the sanctuary with two lamps.
Yeah.
And then these two lamps, you are to look for blameless. They should not be. They should not have any blame.
Yeah.
So these ones, one, you are to place your hands on that lamp. Then from there, it was believed that by faith, your sins will be transferred from you into the lamp.
Yeah.
Then the other one was to be sent to the wilderness. That one was one way of making the earthly sanctuary cleansed. And again, we need to understand that the measurements of the earthly sanctuary are mentioned in the book of Exodus, chapter 25, verses 8 onwards. Maybe Mwalimu to unravel this sanctuary. What is sanctuary? Somebody could be asking, is it the heart? Is it a temple? Is it a church? Or what is a sanctuary?
Thank you. The sanctuary, actually, this is where God himself dwells. Okay, we all know that our body is the temple of God. It's also where Christ dwells in, whereby we need to cleanse ourselves first. So the sanctuary also can be that temple of God, and also our bodies are also the temple of God, the same case being the sanctuary. So that's why actually we see the church is not the people, is not that building, but is the people who come there. So that's when we see now the earthly sanctuary being cleansed. That is the atonement day. It's now you and me. If you are actually separated yourself from evil doings, that's when now Christ is going to do what? To do the the final cleansing, whereby now that all that glory which disappeared when human being sinned in the Garden of Eden will be returned back to us, and then will mark the end of what? The sin.
Thank you. Essentially, in my own words, I can say that it's a consecrated or a sacred area or rather of a church, or it can be a temple or an altar. But then, basically, our viewer there, we need you to understand that sanctuary is the dwelling or where our Almighty Father dwells. Thank you very much. We can move into historicism and prophecy. That is on Sunday.
Thank you. Actually, we see also, it is also, I can put it in this way, interpreting also prophecy. Also, that is historicism and prophecy. It's also, you can put in light terms as interpreting prophecy in the Bible. So actually, when we see historicism is seeing a linear progression of history, whereby from past and present to the future in the major prophecies of the Bible. We see that is the book of Daniel and Revelation being majorly prophetic books. And we see the easiest way to see how this method of interpretation works for biblical prophecies is in the 2nd chapter of Daniel. Actually, before I continue, what do you understand by that 2nd chapter of Daniel, Mwalimu?
Chapter 2 of Daniel.
Yes.
Maybe I can read a few verses to guide us on the basic understanding of the book of Daniel. Basically, in chapter 2, it talks about the dream of Nebuchadnezzar, and we find that Nebuchadnezzar was the Babylonian king.
Yes.
And he gets into a sleep and he dreams, just as you can also dream.
Yeah.
And in his dream, there are several things that he thinks, or rather he dreams of. And he lacks an interpreter who is going to interpret. So he calls the astrologers and those guys who were working in the palace or in his kingdom. And he wanted them to interpret, and even promises that whoever is going to interpret, he was to be given a reward.
Yeah.
So thereafter, we see that nobody in his kingdom could be in a position to interpret the dream. But then there was one person within the kingdom, and that one was none other than Daniel.
Yes.
And somewhere in in verses 24, Daniel is interpreting the dream of Nebuchadnezzar.
Thank you. So we see here the interpretation for the different symbols are actually clearly shown to represent kings and kingdoms, whereby we see the beginning with Babylon, which actually was succeeded with the Medo-Persia, followed by Greek, and then Roman Empire. So we see that image, the way it was actually divided itself. We see the gold, the head is gold.
Yes.
And then when we come down, it had different parts.
Okay, the part of immediately after the head, we have the chest,
The chest, yes.
And also we have the arms,
Yeah.
Which were actually of silver. And this one was basically representing the kingdom of Medo-Persia.
Yeah.
And the third one was the belly and the thighs that was made of bronze.
Yeah.
This one specifically was meant for Greek, and
Yeah.
then the last kingdom was made of iron, and the feet was also mixed with baked clay. And this one represents the Roman Empire kingdom. Thank you.
Thank you. So we see also the visions. These vision that Nebuchadnezzar was shown, also Daniel is being given them in chapter 7 and chapter 8, which cover the same kingdoms with increasing detail, whereby we see and the ones given to John in the Revelation additionally covers history from pagan and papal Rome up to the coming of Jesus and the completion of our what? Our redemption. Also, we see actually many people have tried to come out explaining these prophecies in many ways, whereby we see historicism was therefore how the Protestant reformers saw prophecy unfolding day after the day, the year coming, the year out. So, with the Papa Rome playing a major role, and also the little horn power representing the papacy, there are several identifying marks of the little horn that brought them to that conclusion. That this little horn, which we are actually yet to talk about it as the Papal Rome, whereby we see also two Jesuit priests who have come up with a alternate method of interpreting prophecy. However, during what was called the Counter Reformation in 1500, we see one being called Louis de Alcazar moved the prophetic events as already in the past, whereby now they are known actually as preterism. Also, we see another person by the name Francisco Ribera moved all of them to the future, called futurism. Both methods cleared the papacy of any identification with the political and religious power thus represented in biblical prophecy. So we see actually, unfortunately, it's not good to use this name, but you'll allow me to use it. Most Catholics and later even the Protestants embraced interpretations based on preterism, and more recently, since the Schofield reference Bible in 1906, others also actually based their prophecies in futurism, whereby it's not the right way to interpret the scripture. And we see actually the Seventh-day Adventist Church, however, has remained true to the historicism method taught by the first Protestant reformers, and which is the best way to interpret the scripture and to understand it into more details. Thank you, Mwalimu, and
Thank you.
if you can have something to add on that day before we move to the next day.
Maybe to add on to what we have mentioned or we have discussed on Sunday, we need to realize and understand that the statue that King Nebuchadnezzar dreams about wasn't subdivided. It was a complete unit. It was a whole. It was an entity that was not having any divisions. We realize it has the head, it has the chest and the hands, it has the belly and the thighs. We also see the legs or the feet, which is a complete entity. That one shows us the systematic and the sequence or the succession of the kingdoms that were to exist, which were foretold in the book of Daniel. Maybe if I can request we read from the book of John, chapter 14, verses 29. The book of John, chapter 14, 14, verses 29. The book is John 14:29. The Bible records the following, which are very critical in our discussion. 29 records, I have told you now before it happens, so that when it does happen, you will believe. So this one is actually emphasizing that I have already told you these things, and mark my words, that they will one day, one time do what? Happen. So, viewers, our viewers outside there, we are being appealed to, that all of us, we need to hearken unto the Spirit of God that is speaking to us, that we need to abide by what has been prophesied in the book. That one answers the question, what does Jesus say, that helps us to understand how prophecy can function. So the answer to that is that we need faith, and we also need to believe in anything that has been prophesied in the Bible. Something. So we can move to Monday if there is no addition from your end.
You can continue.
Well, on Monday, the topic is the year-day principle. That one is so clear, our view. It is so direct. Year-day principle. It tells us that a year is equivalent to a day in prophecy. And a day before the eyes of God is equivalent to a year. One day is equivalent to a day, and a day is equivalent to a year before the eyes of the Lord. Maybe to ascertain that, we can read from the book of Numbers. Molim, you can take us through the book of Numbers. The book of Numbers, chapter number 14, to ascertain to our viewers that we are not putting our own words into verse. Numbers chapter 14, the verse is 34.
Okay, the Bible says, chapter 14, verse 34, the Bible records, by the number of the days in which he spied the land for 40 days, a day for a year, a day for a year, ye do bear your iniquities 40 years, and ye have known my breaking off.
Thank you very much, Mulimo. I think from that verse we have already understood that one day represents 1 year, and 1 year in the vice versa is true. We can also ascertain that from the book of Ezekiel chapter 4, and the verse is verses 6. I will read. After you have finished this, lie down again, this time on your right side, and bear the sin of the house of Judah. I have assigned you 40 days, a day for each year. So what does that one tell us, in your own words?
Actually, there are things actually we see the Israelites were doing, whereby they were supposed actually to take days maybe to get something or to reach somewhere. Now, like if we base our discussion or the evidence of a year-day principle in the book of Numbers 14, verses 34, we see these spies that went to Canaan to spy and to look at, to see how that land appears. They brought back the negative information, which were demoralizing the children of Israel. But we see now, instead of God actually destroying them, instead of now them to take 40 days, decided now to make those 40 days to be 40 years to remain in the wilderness, so that they may suffer because of the negative reports that they brought, without knowing that this God who actually sworn to them that he will give them that land, he will also help them to defeat those Canaanites and the Medians who are actually blocking them from reaching that place. So we see there are things that actually were happening, which actually they were provoking God, our Creator, making them now to make, instead of now working them in days, he changed the days to be years. And we see that same thing is now being applied in prophecies.
Thank you very much. Now, I would wish us maybe to understand that also God can use that one to warn us in several ways or means, that one day to him represents a year. So, and again, 1 year to him represents a day. So, in your own opinion or in your own understanding, you need to realize that if God says that 1 year is equivalent to 1 day, we have really sinned and we need to hearken unto the voice of Jesus Christ and turn away from our sinful nature and instead abide by what God tells us. Because if 1 year, rather 1 year, yes, indeed, represents 1 day, then you can be in a position to tell that if you are 35 years today, you have only lived for 35 days before God.
Yeah.
So you can see the warning that those words carry. So maybe to acclimatize what we are saying, we can read from the book of Daniel chapter 7, verses 25, which says, 7:25 records, He will speak again, He will speak again, the Most High, and oppress His saints. I like that. Let me just read it. He will speak, the Most High, and oppress His saints. Who is this person that is going to speak against the Most High and even oppress the saints? Let's get it. So it continues. And oppress his saints and try to change the set times